The bank manager's hand froze in midair as the auction gavel was about to fall. Farmers packed into the old county office watched in silence as a woman in dusty boots stormed through the doors carrying a yellowed document above her head like a weapon. Her hair was tangled from the wind, her eyes red from crying, and her voice shook with rage and heartbreak as she shouted that the bank had made a terrible mistake. The men preparing to sell her late husband's barn for just $7,500 laughed at first until they saw the paper in her hand. It was a forgotten lien notice dated 1981, signed by people long dead, tied to land worth millions. And in that single moment, everyone in the room realized the widow they had mocked might be holding the truth that could destroy them all. Before we begin, if you believe kindness, justice, and second chances still matter in this world, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional stories. Emily Carter had spent her entire life on Eakins Farm, a stretch of land in rural Kansas where golden wheat fields touched the horizon and sunsets painted the sky in orange and red. She wasn't born wealthy. Her parents worked themselves to exhaustion just to keep food on the table. As a little girl, Emily learned how to milk cows before school, repair fences before dinner, and survive storms that destroyed entire seasons of crops overnight. But despite the hardship, the farm was home. It held every memory of her childhood, from her first horse ride to her father teaching her how to plant corn with bare hands. Years later, Emily married Daniel Carter, a hard-working mechanic with rough hands and a soft heart. Daniel loved Emily deeply, and when her father passed away, he left his own dreams behind to help save the struggling family farm. Together, they worked endlessly. They repaired old tractors, sold handmade preserves at local markets, and slowly restored the aging red barn that stood at the center of the property. That barn wasn't just wood and nails. It held family weddings, birthdays, harvest celebrations, and the final dance Emily shared with her father before he died. Then tragedy struck without warning. Daniel was driving home from town one rainy night when a truck ran a red light. Emily received the phone call every spouse fears. By the time she reached the hospital, Daniel was gone. He was only 42 years old. The grief nearly destroyed her. For weeks, Emily couldn't enter their bedroom. His boots remained by the front door. His coffee mug sat untouched near the sink. Every corner of the house reminded her of the life they were supposed to grow old living together. But grief doesn't pause bills. Medical debt piled up. Crop prices dropped. A severe drought ruined half her wheat harvest. Emily borrowed money from the local bank just to survive one season, then another. The bank had once promised they cared about local farmers, but after a large corporation bought majority ownership, everything changed. New executives arrived wearing expensive suits and fake smiles. They cared only about profit. When Emily missed 2 loan payments, they moved fast. They sent warning letters, then threats, then foreclosure papers. Emily begged for more time. She showed them crop projections and explained that next season would be better. She offered partial payments. She even tried selling her livestock. They didn't care. One cold morning, Emily found a legal notice nailed to her front door. Her barn would be auctioned in 14 days. The barn, the one place that held every memory of her family. She collapsed on the porch and cried until sunset. Her neighbors wanted to help, but most were struggling too. Some brought food. Others helped gather signatures for petitions. But the bank ignored them all. The auction day arrived like an execution. Emily stood outside the county office staring at the building where strangers prepared to sell a piece of her soul for less than the cost of a used car. $7,500. That was all they believed her family legacy was worth. Inside, local investors waited eagerly. One developer had plans to tear down the barn and build storage units. Another wanted to convert the farmland into commercial property. Emily felt sick. Then her elderly neighbor, Martha, came running toward her, holding an old rusted metal box. Martha was nearly 80 and had been friends with Emily's late mother. She explained that while cleaning her attic, she found the box her mother had stored decades earlier. She nearly threw it away until she noticed Emily's family name written on the side. Emily opened it with trembling hands. Inside were old photographs, receipts, letters, and legal documents covered in dust. Then she found it. A lien notice dated June 1981. The document revealed that Emily's late husband's father had loaned substantial money to help save the local bank during a financial collapse decades ago. In exchange, the bank placed a lien agreement against portions of surrounding land assets, including development rights connected to Emily's barn property. The debt had never been legally settled. The signatures were there. The county seal was there. Everything looked legitimate. Emily's hand shook as she realized what this meant. If the lien remained valid, the bank had no legal right to auction her barn. She ran. She drove faster than she ever had in her life, praying she wouldn't be too late. When she burst through the county office doors, the auction had already begun. The auctioneer announced $7,000. Another bidder shouted $7,500. The gavel lifted. Then Emily screamed for them to stop. The room turned. People stared. Bank executives smirked. One attorney rolled his eyes. Emily marched forward and slammed the document onto the auction table. The auctioneer hesitated. The bank's lead attorney grabbed the paper and laughed before his expression suddenly changed. His face went pale. He reread it 3 times. Then he whispered something to the bank manager. The manager looked horrified. Whispers spread through the room. The county clerk was called forward. She reviewed the document archives and confirmed something no one expected. The lien had never been removed. For 44 years, the bank had ignored a legally binding financial obligation worth far more than Emily's debt. Interest calculations made the amount enormous. The bank didn't just owe Emily money. They owed her nearly $1.8 million. The room exploded in chaos. Investors stormed out. Reporters arrived after someone leaked the story online. The bank tried offering Emily a private settlement, but she refused. She wanted accountability. An investigation revealed executives knowingly targeted elderly farmers and widows because they believed they were easier to pressure into surrendering land. Several lawsuits followed. Executives resigned. Criminal charges were discussed. Emily became an unexpected symbol of resistance across farming communities nationwide, but the most emotional moment came weeks later. Emily returned to her barn alone at sunset. The legal victory had made headlines, money had arrived, her debts were gone, the farm was safe. Yet she still felt Daniel's absence. She walked through the barn and found an old cassette player they used during harvest nights. She pressed play. Static filled the air. Then Daniel's voice emerged from an old recording. He had recorded a message years earlier while fixing equipment late one night. He joked about how stubborn Emily was and said that if life ever knocked her down, she'd always find a way to rise again because that's who she was. Emily fell to her knees crying. It felt like Daniel had reached across time to remind her she was never truly alone. Months later, Emily used part of her settlement money to help struggling local farmers pay legal fees and avoid foreclosure. She created a nonprofit in Daniel's name that protected family-owned farms from predatory institutions. The barn she nearly lost became a community center where families gathered for weddings, fundraisers, and harvest festivals. And every year on the anniversary of Daniel's passing, Emily sat beneath the stars outside that barn and whispered thank you. Not for the money, not for revenge, but for the miracle hidden in an old forgotten box that saved generations of her family history. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes justice always finds a way, and subscribe for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. And before this story ends, comment below with one word, justice, if you believe no one should ever lose their home to greed. Because sometimes people think they can bury the truth forever. But all it takes is one brave soul and one forgotten piece of paper to bring it back into the light. 2 years after exposing the bank's corruption, Emily Carter believed the worst chapter of her life was finally behind her. She was wrong. The old red barn that had nearly been stolen from her had become a symbol of hope across Kansas. Families gathered there every weekend for weddings, charity dinners, and farmer support meetings. The nonprofit Emily created in her late husband Daniel's name had already saved dozens of farms from foreclosure. News outlets called her the widow who beat the bank, but Emily never cared about fame. She cared about peace. She cared about rebuilding the quiet life she and Daniel once dreamed of. And for a while, peace finally came. The wheat fields returned to life after 2 strong harvest seasons. Her debts were gone. The farmhouse had been repaired. She even began smiling again without feeling guilty about it. Then one ordinary morning changed everything. Emily walked to her mailbox and found a thick legal envelope stamped with urgent markings from a powerful corporate law firm in New York. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a lawsuit. The same banking corporation she had defeated was suing her for defamation, financial damages, and a wrongful interference with corporate restructuring. They demanded $12 million. Emily read the papers 3 times, unable to breathe. The corporation claimed her public interviews after the foreclosure scandal had damaged investor confidence and caused millions in losses. They wanted revenge, and they had endless money to fight her. Emily sat on her porch for hours staring at Daniel's empty rocking chair. She had already survived grief, foreclosure, humiliation, and betrayal. How much more could life take from her? News of the lawsuit spread quickly. Reporters camped outside her farm. Online critics accused her of being greedy. Some claimed she had ruined honest employees' lives. Others said she should have quietly accepted her settlement and moved on. The pressure became unbearable. Donations to her nonprofit slowed down. Some families became afraid to publicly support her. Corporate media painted her as someone who wanted attention. For the first time in years, Emily felt completely alone again. Then something unexpected happened. One evening, dozens of pickup trucks began arriving at her farm. Then hundreds. Farmers from neighboring states showed up carrying food, blankets, handwritten letters, and donations. Families she had helped save stood in front of her home. Single mothers hugged her. Elderly farmers cried while thanking her for protecting their land. Veterans brought American flags and planted them around her property. One man stepped forward and handed her an envelope. Inside was $37. He apologized and said it was all he had left after paying medical bills, but he wanted her to keep fighting. Emily broke down crying. Soon social media exploded with support under the hashtag #HashStandWithEmily. Millions watched her original story. Celebrities donated. Independent journalists began investigating the corporation. That investigation uncovered something far darker. The company suing Emily had secretly been purchasing farmland across multiple states using shell companies. They targeted struggling family farms, forced foreclosures, then sold land to foreign investors and commercial developers. Emily wasn't their first victim. She was simply the first person strong enough to expose them. Federal investigators stepped in. Former employees became whistleblowers. Executives started turning against each other. Then came the most shocking discovery of all. Years passed, and people across America still told the story of the widow who walked into an auction and stopped powerful bankers with a forgotten document from 1981. But what most people didn't know was that Emily Carter was hiding a secret she had never told reporters. A secret buried deep inside the walls of the very barn she fought to save. And that secret would change everything once again. By now, Emily had become a national symbol of courage. Her nonprofit had expanded into multiple states, helping struggling farming families keep their land. She was invited to speak at universities, charity events, and national conferences. Politicians praised her. Farmers treated her like family. Yet every night when the cameras disappeared and the crowds went home, Emily still walked alone into Daniel's old barn. She sat in the same corner where they once planned their future. And she cried, because no amount of success could erase the fact that Daniel was gone. One winter evening, a violent storm tore through Kansas. Winds screamed across the fields. Rain slammed against windows. Lightning cracked through the sky. Emily rushed outside when she heard a deafening crash. A massive section of the barn roof had collapsed. Panicked, she called emergency crews and neighbors rushed over to help. By sunrise, the damage looked devastating. Workers began clearing debris when one construction worker shouted for everyone to stop. Buried beneath broken wooden beams was a rusted metal hatch Emily had never seen before. Confused, she climbed down into the hidden underground space beneath the barn. The air smelled ancient. Dust covered everything. Inside were old trunks, ledgers, photographs, and dozens of locked boxes. Among them was one box labeled in Daniel's handwriting. Emily's hand shook so badly she could barely open it. Inside, she found videotapes, documents, and a handwritten journal. The first page made her knees buckle. Daniel had discovered something weeks before his death. The corruption tied to the bank went far deeper than anyone knew. The executives sent to prison were only middlemen. The real masterminds were wealthy investors who had secretly controlled land acquisitions across multiple countries. Daniel had been documenting everything: names, bank accounts, secret property deals, political connections, bribes, threats. He had hidden the evidence beneath the barn because he knew powerful people were watching him. Emily felt the room spinning. She realized Daniel had left behind enough evidence to expose an international criminal empire. But revealing it could make her a target again. For days, Emily said nothing. She barely slept. Cars began appearing near her property late at night. Unknown numbers called her phone. Strangers watched her at public events. Someone broke into her office but stole nothing. It was a warning. Emily knew she had two choices: stay silent and live safely, or risk everything to finish what Daniel started. She chose Daniel. Federal authorities were contacted secretly. A trusted investigative journalist joined the mission. For months, they quietly built a case. Then one explosive documentary aired nationwide. It exposed billionaire investors who manipulated land shortages, displaced farming communities, and destroyed small-town economies. The reaction was immediate. Global arrests followed. Corporate stocks collapsed. Government officials resigned. Thousands of families reclaimed stolen property. And once again, Emily became the face of justice. But fame brought danger. One night, while returning from a conference, Emily's car was forced off a remote highway. Masked men approached her vehicle. She thought it was the end. Then headlights appeared. Dozens of pickup trucks surrounded the attackers. It was farmers. Hundreds of them had been tracking threats against her after hearing rumors online. They formed a protective wall around Emily until police arrived. Many of them had once been strangers. Now they were family. Emily cried as she realized how many lives had become connected because one woman refused to surrender. Years later, Emily grew older. Her hair turned silver. Her hands became weaker. But every autumn, families gathered at her barn for a festival celebrating resilience. Children laughed where auction papers once threatened destruction. One day, a young girl approached Emily during the festival. She handed her a school essay. The essay explained how Emily's story inspired her dream of becoming a lawyer to protect families from injustice. Emily read it with tears in her eyes. That was when she understood her greatest victory wasn't beating greedy banks. It wasn't winning millions. It wasn't exposing corruption. It was inspiring ordinary people to become extraordinary. When Emily passed away peacefully at 87, thousands attended her funeral. Farmers drove tractors in a mile-long procession. Families placed sunflowers on her grave. Her barn bells rang across the valley. And carved into her gravestone were simple words: she saved what others tried to steal. Oh, long after she was gone, her story lived on, because courage echoes through generations, and sometimes one brave woman holding an old forgotten paper can rewrite history forever.